Hey guys, this is Red and Blue, the channel on YouTube for all things PSG in English. Please subscribe. Today I want to go against the grain and kind of talk about something that's been a hotly debated topic among PSG supporters in recent week. First, sorry, yes, I got it. The the shirt of the winners of the Champions League. Pretty proud of that one. I'm gonna, maybe frame it or something. Anyway, so yeah, bring up a topic that's been hotly debated for PSG fans, which is the quality of our bench. I think during this Club World Cup, there's been a growing concern and kind of a growing chatter that our subs are just not up to scratch and not up to par, and we can't really trust any of them. And that ultimately, like, we're running at the back of, like, generously maybe 12, 13 players. And honestly, like, I think they've had their misses, they've had their flaws. I think the game against Botafogo, we'll come back to that, was obviously a big fail. But at the same time, I feel like right now, like, the conversation is becoming a bit rough on them, and not entirely fair. So I just wanted to go back to this because I think, like, it's funny. I think, like, the game against Botafogo, like, fair. I think half of the team was rotated and we were playing a lot of subs and we end up losing. Even if we just lose 1-0 on, like, a very, very lucky goal on the other end, we do end up losing, and, like, we're clearly not, creating as much as we usually do, not making as many differences. And part of that can definitely be put on the back of our subs who were playing, which, I did at the time. But I think since then there's this little bit of, like, narrative that's getting a lot of traction, and I saw it after the game against Miami, which, we win 4-0. We kind of, like, utterly crush them in the first half, and yet a lot of people were saying, like, oh, look at the second half, like, the subs aren't as good as the starters, and it's a big problem for us, and so on. So just want to break it down into a few things. One is, like, the actual level of our subs and the way, like, the squad, the 25 player squad, is built. Two is, like, the specificity of the moment and of this particular competition, and then, like, a few specific cases where, like, we can go into the individual as well. So I think, like, first, like, let's talk about how the squad is built, because, ultimately, like, Luis Enrique and, by extension, Luis Campos, they've been very clear during last mercato and, like, since they took over in the club. They want like small squads. They don't want squads of, like, 25, 30, like, confirmed pro players and so on. They want a squad where, like, every player gets game time and is involved in the matches, and they do want a squad where, like, young players also features players from the academy or players that we bring in from other places. And so I think there's definitely, like, a choice on their end to have like not as many players as you would have, like, obviously in a Chelsea, for example, who has, like, a plethora of a squad. But I think even if I look at the squad in Real Madrid, if I look at the squad in Man City, club like this, like, they do have like very large teams with a lot of, like, players sitting on the bench who would definitely be starters in other places. And my experience, and we've had that in PSG as well in the past, my experience with this is that it's great on paper, but it makes it very, very difficult to manage on a day-to-day basis, and it's very easy for, like, some players to start feeling frustrated, for, like, some conflict to appear in the locker room, for players to demand to play more, to not understand why some other player is playing instead of them, and then it gets into their friends and who they're close with in the squad, so, like, very easily create some issues, and I think ultimately, like, if we look at the PSG squad this season and what we've achieved with it and the way the season has been going, you've got to end it to Luis Enrique and Luis Campos. Is that, like, in terms of fitness and injuries, we've had, like, essentially none. In terms of, the full squad being involved, completely true. Even if it becomes less as the season goes on, which I'll go on as well in a second. And yeah, there's been, like, no conflict, no major drama coming out, no, like, nothing going on with this. So, as much as I'd love to have, like, a clone of Hakimi sitting on the bench, like, ready to sub in for him, or, like, not even a clone, but, like, someone who's, like, a confirmed fullback, would that also, like, we've got to be conscious of the fact that that might also create problems and not just be like a short-term win, because I think right now everyone is looking at it as like it's an obvious thing that we should have. So there's this, and then like in terms of um, the competition and the moment. We're like at the end of the season. It's a tournament that's, I think, like, despite what they say in the media, like most players don't really care that much for, and most teams don't really care that much for. And I think for our subs as well, like the way Luis Enrique operates, we've seen that in the past 2 seasons, is that at the beginning of the season, every player kind of has his shot at making it into the team. Luis Enrique tries a lot of different combinations, tries like players in a lot of different positions, and then like as we progressively go into the season, he narrows it down and starts like nailing down the right person in the right position. And you end the season as we did with like a starting 11 that's pretty clearly established and etched in stone. And I think that's the case. For the past, I think, couple of months, 2-3 months, the only real uncertainty has been whether we are playing with Barcola or Doué as that last forward with Vara and Dembele. And like the likes of Ramos, who was like supposed to be a starter at the beginning of the season. The likes of Warren Zaïre-Emery was supposed to be like among the starters at the beginning of the season. Progressively get pushed out, and there's less and less like room for subs to come in and challenge that status quo and challenge for the first team. And so for them, like, they get to the end of the season. Honestly, they've had a very long season. They've won pretty much everything. They've stayed involved throughout the season and like stayed loyal to it. But they're tired. They're like mentally like wishing they were on holiday. They know they're not gonna like change the starting 11. And like if I'm Kang-in Lee, starting like in the middle of the second half against Inter Miami, we're 4-0 up. No one is running. Players like essentially like stop playing in this game because like it's so obvious that we're winning it and they can do anything. And at the same time, like, I'm Kang-in Lee, I can do anything that I want in that last 15 minutes that I get to play. Like, I'm never gonna get a starting position against Bayern Munich in the next game. So like, do I play like 110%? Maybe not. And like, it's fairly human and like fairly easy to understand and like fairly hard to criticize, honestly. So yeah, we're gonna finish off this Club World Cup like as we can. The substitute, when they get their chance to play, they will do like what they can and what they have to. But I don't think at this point of the season it'd be completely fair to expect like groundbreaking performances from any of them. Just not that place anymore. And I think, if I look at what other teams are doing, honestly, if we had played this tournament like a Man City, which is do all of our like summer transfer business before the competition and essentially treat it as a bit of a preseason friendly tournament, then maybe like those guys would be like a little bit more motivated. But we didn't. We went straight from like Champions League into this. And yeah, if I'm Kang-in Lee, like I know that the club is likely like, at the very least not opposed to me leaving in the summer. So right now I want to like show myself, get a bit of game time, like do okay, I guess. And then like, sit down, go on a holiday, sit down with Campos and Luis Enrique and figure out what comes next. And once again, I don't think like anything those guys could produce would make much of a difference from them in the end. So hard one, but yeah, like it is what it is. And then, like, when we talk about our subs as well, like, the last thing is, I think it's a bunch of individual circumstances as well. And it's just, like, so easy to paint everyone with the same brush, but I think it's not really, like, reflective of reality. So if I think, for example, of, like, I'll go very quickly through them, but like Warren Zaïre-Emery, I think he's like faced injuries this season. It's been a hard one for him in terms of confirming like the promises that we had seen the year before. He took a huge new contract as well, which came with a lot of expectations. And yeah, he's an 18, 19-year-old kid who's just like figuring it out. It's far from unheard of for like, players at this level to have a rough season confirming. So we'll see what goes on with him next year. I think he's coming back now at a level which is like frankly interesting. And I think when he comes on the pitch, obviously Botafogo was a fail, but like there was a fail for everyone. So I'm not going to go too far into this. But the other time when he sums in, like for Joao Neves, for example, frankly, like I don't feel that at the moment is like such a massive drop in quality versus a starter. So yeah, that might be just me, but yeah. Then like other one like in midfield, Mayulu, same like had a hard game against Botafogo, but we're talking about like an 18-year-old kid who's like basically at the end of his first like 6 months really getting some like semi-regular game time at a big moment in the Champions League. He gets some playing time, but he's still super young, so it's to be expected that he's not like super consistent, and that he's definitely not at the level of a starter. You know, we play him in front of Fabian Ruiz, who's like a Spanish international who's won like best player in the Euro, who went from like playing in Napoli to playing in PSG, winning a Champions League as a starter, and who started like for every coach that he's ever played for. They're like, you know, it's also a reflection. Like, I think sometimes it's not so much a reflection of the skill of the substitute, but also a reflection of the skill for starting 11. That the gap might be like quite big. So yeah, and then like he gets to play against Sanders as a false nine in a role that he hasn't played that much, admittedly. So he's learning, and you can see he's doing what he can in the pitch and kind of respecting what's getting asked of him. And sometimes he's more brilliant than other, but he's kind of like to be expected for a kid of his age at his level at this time. So no, I don't think it's a particular drama either that is there. Once again, it goes into like how the squad gets built, which goes back to point one. So if you don't agree with that, like that's fine, but it's a different conversation. Then in terms of sub, like the third one, which for me is like someone I feel for a lot is Beraldo, who's like universally, I think, among PSG fans, found underwhelming and kind of found lacking in lots of ways. So I'm not gonna like go point by point or anything. I think like he's been here for a couple of years now, and I'll grant and I'll say it up front that like the amount of progression that is shown in this time has been a bit underwhelming, and that for a young defender who's essentially like on the verge of being a regular Brazil international, who's gotten like really like quite a lot of game time with us as well, we should have seen more progression. I think at the same time, and I heard this in a PSG podcast and really resonated with me in terms of reframing the way we think about him. He's a 21-year-old defender. Literally, like I was just looking at Transfermarkt to like get my data right on this. So currently, he's valued at like 25 million euros, and he's like I think like 19th in terms of value for defenders who are like 21 and under. So in his age group, he's like, in the top 20, at least in terms of transfer value. And like at that age, we see a few different options. One, you've got like, the outlier, like the superstars, which is Pau Cubarsí. Pau Cubarsí is up there, number one in value. He's already playing regularly for a top club. And he's clearly like, the generational talent at this position at his age group. Fair. Then you see like players who are like just now like moving into top teams and getting the value for it. So Dean Richardson, for example, just moved into Real Madrid, and so like he's getting like a very high value as a result because he sold from Bournemouth to Real Madrid for a high amount of money. You see the guy who just signed in Liverpool as left back from Bournemouth as well, same thing, like very high value. So yeah, I mean, like those guys just completed their big move. I think like both of them, those cases, like they're likely to be starters in the big teams in the coming year. But honestly, like there's not 20 of them either, and they're just now breaking into the top teams when like Beraldo has been with us for 2 years, and then like the vast majority of them are like known talents, but who haven't like broken into like really the top teams. So Antonio Silva, who's still in Portugal, Diomande, who's still in Portugal, Hato, who's captain of Ajax and highly talked about player. All of those guys are still in that age bracket. They've like gotten regular game time, but in like lower leagues, lower teams, like nothing like what Beraldo is getting into PSG. So yeah, ultimately, like I'm not saying Beraldo is gonna become like Paolo Maldini or Thiago Silva or like Sergio Ramos or anything. But even if you look at older defenders, it's interesting as well. Like I went looking like Saliba, William Saliba of Arsenal, who's probably like if not the like one of the top 3 defenders in the world at this point, if you ask me. When he was Beraldo's age, he was just finishing his loan in Marseille, and so he was completing like essentially like one like really high level good season in Ligue 1 and like moving back into Arsenal to start playing for Arsenal. Gvardiol, who's obviously like a big talent in Man City, when he was Beraldo's age, which is like 2-3 years ago, he was just getting out of like I think Dinamo Zagreb and going into Leipzig. So like not even making it into a top team, making it to like what I would say an intermediate plus team. I looked at Ruben Dias. He was still in Portugal at the same age. Obviously now like one of the top defenders in Man City, top defenders in the world. I look at Gabriel of Arsenal as well. When he was that age, he was still playing in Lille, in Ligue 1, and like he was a good defender for sure, but like he wasn't anywhere close to being like the top level defenders. There's obviously examples going the other way. Typically, like the guys from Liverpool I looked at, so like Konate, Upamecano in Bayern Munich as well. Those guys went through the Red Bull system, and so they were already like very, very highly rated early on in their career at 21-year-old. But honestly, it's far from being the rule. So all of this to say, like, let's also calibrate our expectations for those players, because someone like Beraldo, I'm hoping like starts showing more improvements over time, but he's still at a very, very early stage in his career, and the place that he's at already really like should set him up to become like, you know, not maybe once again like not a Pau Kubarsi like generational player, but could very well lead him to become like one of the top 10 defenders in the world if he's like developed properly. So let's be mindful of that. And then like you do have some examples, and I want to say it as well, of like starters who are underperforming. I think like Kang-in, for sure, I think like he's proven that he doesn't necessarily have the talent to be in PSG. I think that's the bet we took, and we signed him for 20 million euros, and I think we're going to make more money on it. And he's going to be a great player at at Napoli level, at Atletico level, at Dortmund level, like kind of those like really like legacy European teams, high level, but not like quite the Real Madrids and the Bayern Munich and Man City of the world. And that's where we're at right now. Gonçalo Ramos, pains me to say, but like we've seen during the World Cup as well, like maybe it's time for him to think of what the next stage of his career looks like. I do firmly believe that with regular game time and like a team that plays in a way that suits him better, he could very well become like one of the top 10 striker in Europe. And I think when you watch Ekitike, who bombed in PSG and did terribly, and now he's doing super well in Germany, and he's talked about for a transfer to one of the top Premier League teams, it says a lot. And I think like we do have like a lot of quality, just sometimes it's just not the right situation and not the right setup for them. So anyway, all of this to say, like, let's not despair as well. I think, like, when push came to shove as well, like, Beraldo, like, when he played against Aston Villa, he played well, and like, we didn't lose, we went through. So those guys can also like raise their levels to the right occasion. But we do have a transfer window coming up. I am hoping, and I think the club also realizes that they need to like improve the average level of the squad, and that will come from increasing the level of the players on the bench. And so we'll see who gets brought. If all of a sudden we bring Zabarni on, and we've got one starter in defense, one substitute in defense with either Zabarni or Marquinhos, that's a quality substitute, to say the least. So yeah, we'll see what the future brings, but let's not overreact. The last thing as well, like, I'm becoming very long, so I want to like shut up. But the one thing, if I look like historically at the top teams, I was thinking of like the Barcelona, like top of Europe Barcelona, of like Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets. Do you guys remember who was like the substitute in midfield in that team? Because like honestly, I've been thinking of this for a day, and like I cannot like put my finger on it. Because I think like also like, yeah, like I said earlier, I think it's not so much like in cases, it's not so much our substitutes who are bad. It's also like we don't appreciate enough how strong our starting 11 is. And when I see like Vitinha, Ruiz, and Joao Neves this year, yeah, we're talking about that quality of midfield of like Busquets, Xavi, Iniesta, or like we're talking about like the Barcelona, like Casemiro, Kroos, Modric. Maybe not quite up to that level, because those two sides had like one year after year after year. So for us, we're just at the start. But if things go the way we want them to go, yeah, we're talking about that level. And so if Warren Zaïre-Emery is not like quite at the same level, maybe it's also because we're talking about players who are like transformational and generational in terms of their skills. So yeah, let me know what you think. I wanted to like jump on the mic and kind of give you this perspective because I feel like, yeah, like I said, like I feel the conversation is like slightly unfair sometimes. Understand I'm the minority. Please like let me know why I'm wrong and why I'm silly and like why why I should think differently. More than happy for it. So yeah, that's it for me. Please like comment and let me know what you think on all of this. Like the video, even if you disagree. Don't hesitate to leave a like anyway. And please subscribe to the channel for more PSG content. And don't forget, ici c'est Paris!